he was almost killed, but he was there at the delivery. And I remember at the end of the delivery when the baby was born, she said, "Thank you for coming back to me."
Welcome to What Came After. I'm your host, Manya Marcus. On What Came After, we'll take a look at the many ways that people's lives changed on and after the brutal massacre in Israel on October 7th, 2023. We'll be speaking with people in Israel and around the world about how the devastating attack by Hamas has shifted, shaped, and changed them. To learn more about our podcast, please visit us at whatcameafter.com. Hi, honey.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining me. Turns out we're both semi-Chicagoans.
Yes, we are.
We're adjacent. Oh, actually, no, you're truly from
I'm a
Chicago,
Chicagoan,
and
yeah.
I'm just outside.
Yeah.
So I wanted to start by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself and specifically what drew you to the field of midwifery.
Okay, so I was born and raised in Chicago, lived there for the first 30 years of my life. Since I was 16, I knew I wanted to be a nurse. And I got married, had a couple of kids. And about a year before we made Aliyah, I started working in the labor and delivery department at Evanston Hospital in Chicago. And I fell in love. I loved it. And I was a nurse there. The midwife system in America is different than the midwife system here in Israel. And then we made Aliyah. So I was like, okay, well, there goes that part of my career. I was hoping to become a nurse here in Israel, but I knew it was a long process, a bureaucratic process. I wasn't quite sure what was ahead of me. So we made Aliyah in 2004 with 3.5 kids.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. And once my fourth was born here, my son, once he went to Gan, I started to think seriously about getting back into nursing. I loved it and I felt I was ready to. So I followed up on all the paperwork and I took the boards, which was a long process. And taking the boards, if you pass the boards, you get your nursing license here. So I didn't have to go back and do any sort of stage or any sort of hospital time. It was just the boards. When I say just, it was a big test. And then I sort of let that, lie around a little bit. I think I worked for a little while at a clinic. I knew that I loved working in a labor and delivery room, but I didn't know how I was going to get there because I knew that in order to work in a labor and delivery room in Israel, you have to be a midwife. And I thought to myself, that's not going to happen. It's another 2 years of school. It's all in Hebrew. Not happening.
And you had several children
And
at
I
that
had
point.
little kids at that point. Correct. Fast forward, had another baby. And when she was in Gan or school, I said to myself, that's it. I'm done being a stay-at-home mom. I want to go back to the hospital. I love hospital culture. That just calls to me. That's the nurse I want to be. So I figured I can't be a midwife. I'm not going to work in the delivery room. I want to work in that arena. So I applied a couple of hospitals. I ended up getting an interview at Tel Hashomer Hospital, and they accepted me into their nursery, their baby nursery. And I thought, okay, close enough. We'll do it. So I started working there and I actually loved it. And, the Hebrew was hard. And I remember I used to stand really close to the parents when I would talk to them so I could understand them. And I'm sure I made 4 million mistakes and probably said some really funny things. And then I had a friend of mine, a new friend who came into the nursery, and she herself, she was a lawyer in America. She's Israeli, went to America, was a lawyer, really motivated person. And she went to nursing school, became a nurse, and was on her path to become a midwife. And we became very friendly. And she said, Chani, you have to be a midwife. And I said, no way, not happening. And she said, no, you have to. And I said, okay, fine. So I had to take another test. And then I got accepted into the midwife program at Tel Hashomer. And I was clueless about everything. I didn't realize that there were just like maybe 3 or 4 programs throughout the country. And somehow I got into this program and I started. And it was a really hard 2 years, let's say 19 months or so, 18 months. School, work, kids. But I pushed forward because I had a goal in mind. And I just kept telling myself, okay, you're going to do this. You're going to make it through. And it was a lot. It was days and it was nights and it was double shifts sometimes because you had to do practical clinical hours. But I was madly in love. As hard as it was, probably on my family even more, and as hard as it was for me, it was all worth it. And I took my midwifery boards and I passed and I started to work at Tel Hashomer, Sheba, in March 2020. 2 weeks before Corona. So that was my beginning. Corona hit, the world turned upside down.
So you're really no stranger to doing this job in crisis.
Correct. Yeah, that was literally my introduction. And I'm like, why is everybody so pressured here? Not realizing that things do calm down. When people calm down from Corona, everything sort of relaxed. But my introduction was pressure. My introduction was a feeling of pressure in the unit, pressure from the doctors, pressure from the staff. Just nobody knew what to do and how to deal with pregnant women, deliveries, women coming in with Corona, testing women. It was a whole new world for everybody. So not only was I navigating this new path of midwifery, but I was also navigating a path of an emergency medical situation in the world. So
since you started in March 2020, do you feel like in your mind or in your heart, you fuse midwifery with crisis?
Interesting. I don't know that I've ever thought about it like that, but I definitely feel that it taught me most of the time to be calm in what could be somewhat of a critical or an emergency situation. That doesn't mean you don't move quickly. That doesn't mean you don't work fast and get what you have to do done. But yeah, I think that that's an interesting way of thinking about it, but definitely had an influence on learning to be calm in those situations. When you're in a room alone with a woman who, can I be a little graphic?
Yes,
who's
please.
starting to bleed and you have to get her to the OR and you're there, and in order for everyone else to come in, they have to now gear up in all their clothing. Yeah, it definitely teaches you how to sort of stay calm and think, what do I have to do now? And what are the steps? And yeah, definitely.
And it sounds like because of Corona, you had to learn how to work through fear and anxiety. I mean, the bleeding starts and everybody has to suit up, but now are we wearing masks?
Right.
So
yeah.
You were kind of eerily prepared.
Yeah, in a way, yeah, definitely. Didn't put that together, but yeah, I think I was. I think it did pave the road.
Yes.
Pave the foundation.
Okay. So let's talk for a second about October 7th. I'm certainly curious to know what that day felt like for you. And then let's talk about how it started to merge with your professional life.
So just even thinking about October 7th, I get a pit in my stomach. It was Simchat Torah. I got up early. I was outside in my garden. I like on Chag and Shabbat, I like to go out in my garden. And I sort of, like to daven outside a little bit by myself. I'm in Modiin, and I started hearing booms and sirens, not in Modiin. But it was really quiet. It was very early, and I literally could hear it from far away. And I thought, this is weird. And I went in and I said to my husband, I said, either there's a crazy big targil going on, like a army practice, or we're at war. I literally said those words. And then I went back outside and I was continuing. And he left to go to shul, to synagogue. And he came right back in and he goes, you're right, Chani, we're at war. And he had run into a neighbor who had updated him. And then it's like, you just don't know what to do with yourself. You going to neighbor's house, and we're on a block of religious and not religious people. So the people who are Shomrei Shabbat, who aren't watching TV, are sort of being filled in by the people who are watching the news and TV. I personally didn't turn on my TV or my phone. I did carry my phone around with me, but I didn't turn it on. My 2 married kids were in Jerusalem, so I sort of thought I want to just have my phone nearby in case they call. It was just a feeling of we didn't know what to do with ourselves, how to function, what was going to be on after the Chag when we turn on the news. And literally, it was just a horrible, sickening day, as it was for everyone. And then you turn the news on Saturday night, and it's worse than you can imagine. And it kept getting worse and worse. And so.
Do you have any children who are in the army?
Yeah. So I have a son in Miluim, a son-in-law in Miluim. He got out of Oz on Thursday, thank God. 3rd time in. My son started the army right before Pesach. He started his service. He's in Golani. He's loving it. He's still in basic training, so we're still breathing. But yeah, so we're definitely inculcated in the army. Sunday, my son and my son-in-law went into Miluim the day after, and that was numbing. You can't even feel. You can't even feel because it's so painful, and you're sitting there looking at my daughter, and she's coping with something that I never had to cope with, and my other daughter had just finished her army service, and her friend was killed, and she was going to his funeral as soon as it was. She was walking around Sunday, literally in a I don't even know, in a daze, I guess, because What's she, 21 years old, and all of a sudden the loss of her first friend, and can't even tell you how many funerals she's been to since. So it's really affected all of my children in a very, very deep way, and of course their mother. So yeah.
When you said that they went into Miluim, you mean actually that they went into...
So my son is more in Ayosh. He's in Judah and Samaria. Like, he's in the explosives. So he went off to his base, and, he has a wife and a baby. So that was really hard. My son-in-law, my daughter and I drove him down to State Taiman on Sunday morning with a couple of other Chayalim, his friends, his soldiers, that we took with. And it was surreal. It was very apocalyptic. You barely see anybody on the road except for people driving their soldiers in. And you saw tanks driving south. And I watched them say goodbye.
And this is Sunday, October 8th.
Yeah. So, I left them their privacy, but, I glanced in the rearview mirror. And you don't want to see your daughter hugging her husband who's going off to, you don't know what. We didn't know what. So that was, it was a hard day. She moved back home, and, you're just getting through those first few weeks. Nobody's talking to anybody. You're looking at your phone all the time and checking when they have their phone. It was a very, very scary few weeks.
So you've been very touched.
Yes.
By the war.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about how it has intersected with your career. When did you start delivering babies again?
I probably went in, within a few days back to work.
Let me pause you just for a second and ask, when you went in a few days after October 7th, did you already have a sense that everything has changed and that this job is going to change in some ways as well?
Yes and no, meaning obviously you don't know that you're going to be meeting women whose brothers have died or whose husbands have died or who've themselves just been traumatized. Or you're going to all of a sudden see your unit and it literally looks like an army base because husbands are coming in at the last second fully geared with uniforms and smelly and big gun. I mean, I've never saw so many big guns in a hospital unit in my life.
You mean they're coming in
they're
to be
coming
with
in
their
off
wives?
The field to be with their wives at delivery. And some of them just make it. In my experience, I don't know that any husbands have missed the deliveries, but it could be that was my experience. It was more the sadness and the stress that we all felt that I sort of knew when you go in. And I don't remember exactly what day I went back to work. It was, I have my shifts. So, every week when you're going in, I know I did not work on that Shabbat and I know I didn't work that Sunday. It could be Monday or Tuesday I went back. I don't remember exactly. And in a way, it's good to work because it keeps your mind off things. And when you're busy, you're not thinking. But then when you go out to the nurse's station and the news is on, or you're sitting in the staff room and the news is on, you can't eat. You're sitting there and they're reporting how many people were killed and you're like, oh, there goes my appetite again. So that was really hard. Many of us had sons and daughters in service. So everybody was just on edge, checking their phones and, not themselves. So that was hard. A lot of the doctors actually were in Miluim, also in reserves. So they were called in. So definitely some of our doctors were missing. Yeah, it was very good to go back to work. And it gave me a sense of doing something. But on the other hand, it was a different environment, a sad environment, when it should be happy.
How were the women? How were pregnant women? How were they reflecting on their experience with you?
When a woman is in labor, she's focusing on labor. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. There's definitely a higher level anxiety. Also, we're in Ramat Gan, so we definitely got a lot of sirens. The delivery room themselves are considered safe rooms, I guess, bomb-proof, what do you call it? Mm-hmm. So we didn't have to leave any women in the middle of a delivery or bring them somewhere after they've had an epidural or something. But it's stressful because all of a sudden your phone goes off and then there's a loudspeaker saying, go to the safe areas, and the husband's phones are going off. And so it can be very stressful. And in a way, it's also victorious. Like, I remember specifically one time there was a siren and I delivered a baby a few minutes afterwards. And I was like we were there pushing, and then the baby was born and I'm like, yes, that's victory. So it was really emotional. But the women are definitely more anxious. They were. We've had women whose husbands are still inpatient rehab.
Due to injuries?
Injuries from the war. Sorry, yeah. Didn't specify. So I had a woman whose husband came in and he was wearing the yellow bracelet, the hospital bracelet that, patients in rehab wear. And he was almost killed, but he was there at the delivery. And I remember at the end of the delivery when the baby was born, she said, "Thank you for coming back to me."
Mm.
To her, she sort of said it out loud, but it was clear she was talking to him, and it was really quite emotional. She actually held it together the whole delivery. And then at the end, after the baby was born, I think she just realized how close she had come to almost becoming a widow. So it's been a very, very powerful experience.
You see incredibly intimate moments in people's lives, and you
Yes.
know how to witness it and also how to give people space. And it just reminds me of the scene you described when you give your daughter and her husband space, but you are looking in the
Yeah.
mirror. You're used to that. You're used to witnessing
Yeah.
tender times.
Yes, it's true. It's very interesting. Regardless of the war or anything, you're in that moment that's really one of the most intimate, special, amazing moments that a couple or a person, depending on their situation, can experience. And I still cry at deliveries, regular old deliveries. I'm blessed to be able to watch those moments of intimacy. It's a tremendous blessing, and I don't take that for granted. And now, as I said, this has just made it all the more emotional.
It's powerful.
Yeah, powerful.
It's very powerful. So you are now part of a program of midwives. Can you explain what the program is, what you do? Tell us a little bit about it.
I'm part of the National Midwives Association in Israel. And some of the other midwives in our unit had been recruited to take part in this program. It's called Litzidech, which it really means by your side. And it was established to accompany women who are pregnant, who have become war widows and/or their spouses have been seriously injured by the war, either physically or emotionally. So that's the program that I became involved in, Litzidech. I just want to add as a note that there are 3 other programs that the National Midwife Association established since the war. Right when the war started, they set up a hotline for pregnant women to call to be a source of answers because people were being cleared from their homes and you could be having sirens going off and you don't have anywhere to turn and you don't know what to do. So they recruited midwives, and every woman who called would get assigned a midwife, and the midwife would be in touch with this woman by phone. I think that they had 1,000 phone calls from the beginning of the war, and there were 40 midwives involved in that.
Wow.
Yeah.
40 midwives
40 midwives for
fielding
1,000
1,000 calls.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
There were also some home visits there. I think that they had 250 home visits. And then they set up a postpartum program, and that was sponsored by Huggies. Huggies approached us and said, we want to start a postpartum program. They did that. They established this postpartum program also to follow women at home, visit them at home, make sure that everybody's doing okay, and mostly be in touch by phone. Again, most of this is by phone.
This is a Huggies product placement. That's amazing. This is the diaper, yes?
Yes, Huggies the diaper.
Great.
Which is amazing that they thought up that idea.
Wonderful.
And they came to us with that, yeah. And then the Jewish Federation of North America wanted to sponsor, they're the sponsors of Litzidech, and they wanted to sponsor another program in the North, which, as we know, the North is a very hot zone right now. And the women who are actually still living in the North and pregnant, there are times when they can't necessarily get out of their homes or out of their villages. So they set up a program for women in the North, actually I should say couples in the North and midwives, and they're working with MADA. MADA is the ambulance. It's like the Red Cross. That's what it is. Okay. And I think right now they're working with 340 women, and the midwives meet with them, and they sort of go through everything of, well, what if you can't get to a hospital and you go into labor? And what are we going to do? Here's the plan. And the midwives were outfitted with full equipment by MADA to do a delivery and, God forbid, a resuscitation on the baby. And they had special training of resuscitation. We're all trained in resuscitation, but, they had extra training. And they're in touch with MADA. And if they need to get to the woman in a bulletproof van, MADA will pick up the midwife and bring the midwife to the couple who needs them. So this is all being planned now, and this is what's going on now in the North. So those are the 3 programs, was the hotline and this program for the North and the postpartum. Our program, Litzidech, the Israel Midwives Association was approached by somebody whose sister was a widow, and she was pregnant. She was widowed by the war, and she said, can you guys help her? She needs help. She's feeling alone and lost, and she needs help. So they came up with this idea to pair widows or these women who've had injured husbands with a team of midwives. And when I say a team, it's 2 to 3 midwives. We've each gotten assigned a pregnant woman. Up until now, there's been 27 pregnant women who are widows and 8 women whose husbands have been injured mentally or physically. Somebody put on our WhatsApp group at work, does anyone want to volunteer? They're looking for a volunteer for this program. They have a new woman, and they're looking for midwives. So I said, you know what? Yeah, I really wanted to do something. So I texted my friend who sent the message, and she put me in touch with the woman in the Midwives Association, and we were in touch. I live a little bit far from this woman, but it happens to be that this woman wants to deliver at Tel Hashomer. She has not yet delivered. So that's why I'm the delivering midwife, hopefully, assuming all goes according to plan. And then there's 2 other midwives involved who live a little bit closer to her. So we're a team of 3 midwives, and we're assigned 2 other people in the Midwives Association who are sort of our person to turn to if we have questions or need guidance or help. So first we're approached by the woman from the Midwives Association, and we have a WhatsApp group with her, and she gives us the details of the pregnant woman. We sort of have a strategy of how we're going to approach this woman. And then the 3 of us went on to form a WhatsApp group with this pregnant woman. So we have a WhatsApp group with the Midwife Association, and we have a WhatsApp group with the pregnant woman. And basically the point of it is that she is going to feel that she has people who are going to be with her through the pregnancy process and through the delivery and through postpartum instead of being alone. And right now, she feels very alone, and she feels a lot of different things, trauma and sadness and unsurety, and everything you planned and you thought isn't what it's going to be. So it's really hard. We sent that first WhatsApp, and we didn't know what to expect. And you're treading carefully. What do you say? How do you say it? Is she going to be accepting of this? Is she going to be interested in this? I think that sometimes people push away other people. Side note, on top of the 2 women that we're in touch with who are from the Midwives Association, they also provide every few weeks a presentation on Zoom for all of us involved in the organization. And they talk to us about things like trauma and trauma for the midwives and trauma for the patients, and how do we cope with it? How do we deal with it? What are tools? So those are very helpful. And then you sort of hear stories from other midwives, and it's very helpful to have this group, this togetherness that we can work together and sort of hear what other people have gone through and done, and it helps you sort of feel your way. And then we meet with the pregnant woman. We meet with her every 2 weeks.
You meet with her in person?
Yeah. So a lot of the conversation is on WhatsApp because that's the 24/7, capability to reach her and for her to reach us. And then we meet with her every 2 weeks, and then, the delivery will be available. So we started that first WhatsApp, and she was amenable, and we set up a time to meet, which was pretty impressive because 3 nurses to find a time that we're not on a shift or anything.
That is impressive.
Yeah. So we met. We tried to make it sort of relaxed and fun, and we brought food and cake just to make it a breakfast meeting. And we really weren't sure what to expect. We went to her house, and she was very, very welcoming, and she was very happy to see us and to talk to us. And I think that part of it is that you really feel alone, and we're professionals, and we've come in to help her get to her goal of having a baby. And so she can sort of let her guard down with us and connect to us in a way that I think she's finding it. And I think a lot of these women are finding it hard to connect to other people. It's a lot of responsibility, and it's a really good feeling that you could be there for somebody in such an important way.
For these women who are relying on you for support and they feel alone, do most of them have families who are trying to support them, but it's not the support that they exactly need?
Yes. Very good question, because that's really it. It's very tricky. The family situation is complicated because sometimes they sort of pull away from the family, not in a way that they can control, but they're going through their own pain, I think, and it's too much to take on the pain of other family members. I'll just give an example of one woman who did deliver, and she didn't want anyone in the delivery, just the midwives who she was with. So that was the 3 midwives and this woman, and that was it. It's such an emotional experience, and so heavy and so, on the one hand, you're bringing life, and on the other hand, you've experienced death. And those two things they're not supposed to go together. And it's a lot for these women. And yeah, you really do see that it's almost that they feel very safe with us. We're a safe place for them. And I think that with their families, it's a little bit less safe and more complicated.
So I'm a therapist. You sound like you are therapists with hard skills, therapists in motion, because really what you're describing is providing support to somebody who values the fact that you're a little bit outside her life. She doesn't have to carry your expectations, your hopes, your dread, your trauma. You are free of that. Right. And I'm imagining these women who are not only dealing with the difficulty with their own families processing pain, but also the father, families of the father. The baby has a
Right.
very serious
Yes.
meaning.
Yes. So we haven't gotten to that because she hasn't delivered yet.
Yeah, no,
so,
I'm just imagining all the
but
factors.
yeah, and each time we meet with her or you hear these stories, you're overwhelmed with how big this is. It's so much bigger, and there's so many layers, just so many layers of pain, and also there's so many layers of wanting to connect. This woman wants to connect with us. At this point, it's like we're her friends. We always actually say to each other, thank God we have each other, because we leave these, literally last week we met and we left and we chatted a bit as we walked out of her house. And then before we all parted ways, we just gave the three of us, the midwives, we just gave each other a hug, like the three of us together, because it's a lot for us. Because as you said, she's got the trauma and she's got the burden and she's the one who's had this loss, but it's hard to hear. We're sad. You get tears in your eyes listening, and you're watching somebody else in pain that's basically unfathomable. These women have experienced hell. They are in hell, hopefully finding their way out. And that's also part of it, is talking about the baby and preparing for the baby. And that's sort of the light in the picture.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also scary for them. Who's going to be there to help, or that kind of thing. So you're really dealing with a lot of different things, expectations in the delivery room and expectations of afterwards, and dealing with all the things that come with pregnancy, the physical stuff, they're not feeling well, the throwing up, the swelling, everything. So you're medical, and I guess you are psychological too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the truth is, it's very helpful, these presentations that they have, because it first of all, it sort of validates what you're thinking, and it also gives you some tools. So that's nice that they have that.
In terms of what happens afterwards, in addition to the physical piece of it, I don't know if you've been through or heard stories about women being challenged in terms of naming babies who are delivered after a father's death.
We just talked about that, actually. We haven't had that, but it had one woman who the family wanted to give it one name, and she did not want to, and it became an issue. So that's also part of the complication. There's so much. This war and this tragedy and the things that people are living through is so far-reaching on so many things that you don't even think about until it's brought up. It's hard to think about. It's hard to imagine. And even hearing it firsthand, it's still sometimes hard to even imagine that this is what happened.
How long after the birth are you anticipating that you'll stay in these women's lives?
So it's funny because the three of us sort of feel like, well, we just want to be the grandmothers. We'll come over. We'll help you bathe the baby. I think it's a 6-week postpartum connection. But on the other hand, you sort of feel like, how could I ever leave this person? We've formed this connection that's so deep and so serious and so meaningful, hopefully, that you feel like you want to just be involved in this person's life for a long time.
Is this your first?
Yes. I haven't heard of anybody who's done 2 women yet. It could be that that'll happen if, as long as this war continues, unfortunately. But yeah, so this is my first woman.
I'm wondering if it would be possible, to be 3 grandmothers to the baby if you guys have to keep moving on to new women.
Right. Right.
It's just
That's interesting. It's a lot, right?
because now you're focused on,
Her
yes,
and this situation.
yes.
Correct. Yeah. I'm not there yet, so I haven't really thought about
We'll
it.
see.
But yeah, exactly.
Does she have psychological support? Do these women, are they provided with psychological support?
They could be. I mean, the country offers a lot, I think, a lot of support. It's hard for them. They're not there yet. In the couple of cases that I've heard, I think there's anger. And I think that sometimes that prevents a person from being able to accept help. And as I said, for some reason, being a midwife is sort of what opened the door for us easily, I should say, very easily. And she's latched on to us. But I think that the psychological help, that aspect of it, it's harder for her to accept. So we really have to be on top of that aspect as much as we can. We have talked a lot about postpartum depression because it can be a very serious situation after delivery for any woman. And these women are in a higher risk category, obviously. So we really have to have our fingers on the pulse, monitoring that as best as we can through the relationship we've formed also.
When you say that some women are feeling anger and that prevents them from accepting psychological help, what are they feeling anger towards?
It's hard to say. I think just anger that it happened, anger that they're in this situation and they didn't want to be in this situation. So I think, isn't that one of the stages of grief or something? I don't know. I remember that. But yeah, so I think that you definitely sense anger.
It's interesting that you referenced the stages of grief because the first one is supposed to be denial. But you don't have the luxury of denial when there is something growing inside you, a reminder and a reality.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't avoid this. There's no avoidance.
There's no way to stay still when you're developing a human.
Yeah. It's true. It's very, very true. And that's why I think that it's literally this program could be life-saving because there's so many feelings that these women are having. And they have solid support. They have 2 to 3 women who are really gonna do backbends to do anything they can for that person. So yeah, I think it's really important.
So are these women that you see across Israeli society, religious, non-religious?
Yeah.
From all over?
In my group, I'm the only religious one.
Okay.
And it's also midwives that are not only, they could be hospital midwives and they could also be clinic midwives. So it's not everyone that works in a hospital. You do need in each group one that works in a hospital so that you can have the person deliver. And then the hospitals are sort of prepped. They know they're going to come in and they want to make sure to have everything as sensitive as possible, that everyone knows that this woman is coming in and this is her situation and to be treated sensitively. So the midwife who works at that hospital is the connection between the hospital and the patient also, and the woman also.
It sounds really nice that you guys get to be a trio of grandmas.
Yeah.
But would it be different if somebody her own age was the midwife,
like a 35-year-old midwife or something? Not that I'm saying my age, but I'm 50.
You're not 35. That's all
I'm
we
not
need to know.
35. It's interesting. Actually, I don't know the other midwives that are participating in this other than sort of seeing them on a Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
They're definitely younger midwives and a little bit not as young midwives. I think she connects, in our specific case, I can't speak for everybody, but even my friends, I think that they just connect. I don't think it matters the age. I think it matters that you're a midwife and that you're a professional and that you come in with your experience and your background. And they're depending on you and they're going to lean on you. And I think it doesn't matter how old you are. They want to feel safe and secure. And I think that that's what we try to do. We try to give them that feeling of safety and security.
Well, you've been through it and they haven't. So there's this gift of experience.
Yeah, it's true.
How are you taking care of yourself?
Mm-hmm. It's helpful to have, as I said, it's helpful to have the other 2 midwives. Every 2 weeks, the meeting with everybody. So we sort of can talk and can cry and can share our feelings. So we do that. And having the other 2 midwives, as I said, that's very helpful. In terms of myself, I don't know. I don't think I've done anything special. A lot of thinking. It's definitely a lot to absorb. Sometimes I think I compartmentalize a lot and I can push it away. And then sometimes it'll hit you. Those are my Shabbat mornings outside in the garden.
Is that when it hits you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's when you can sit and just be with yourself and your thoughts and get it out, cry, talk to God. So much we don't understand and so much we can't understand. So we just sort of have to keep moving forward, because if you try to understand it, or if you try to figure it out in any way, there's no answer. So yeah, just a lot of working it out in my head, I think.
Would you say that this experience of the war broadly, but also your work, has shifted your faith in any way?
Not shifted my faith. I'm what you call Dati Leumi,
Mm-hmm.
which is sort of modern Orthodox, I guess, in
Yeah.
America.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't lessened my faith. If anything, I guess it's made me, this is very personal, but it's made me sort of say, okay, God, you're doing this. We're in your hands. We don't get it. And we just have to deal with it and try to get through it as best as we can and try to be the best person that we can be throughout all of this. And in a way that helps me, because I can't take responsibility for anything that's happening, everything that's going on around us and everything that's going on in the country, both within our own people and all our friends around us.
Mm-hmm.
So to take that burden off myself, it's not me. It's not my responsibility to fix it. It's just sort of up to God. And if I can let go like that, I think it helps me. I think it really does.
That's beautiful. I'm glad you have that Shabbat morning time and a garden.
I really am glad too.
Good to have a garden.
I love my garden. It's my little piece of paradise.
So I'm sort of guessing that your interest in being a midwife and your love for the delivery room is a love for life and a love for babies and a love for, it's really like such a joyful time, often.
Mostly.
Not always.
Yes.
It has a lot of promise. You've been thrust into this world of death now. Are there any other thoughts you have on just compressing life and death in the way that you've had to in the last 11 months?
It's a deep question.
Yeah, take your time.
Okay. It's sort of interesting. I actually thought you might ask me something like that, and I've been trying to sort of formulate or think about something. First of all, go way back. Birth, labor, delivery, it used to be 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
You could survive it or not. And women who delivered were literally on that line of, are they going to survive? And is the baby going to survive? And now, thank you, modern medicine, that statistic has gone way up.
Mm-hmm.
And birth has become much happier and much calmer. But if you go back to base, that is what it is. It is life and death. So now it's almost like we're going backwards. We're bringing that together. You see amazing people who do this in an amazing way. I just remember one woman, and this is not connected to the program, but it was within the first months after the war, and a woman came in and her brother had been killed. She was with her sister and her mom, and they said, we choose life. And the mom was wearing her son's T-shirt from the Army and his dog tags. I could barely keep it together. But it was so powerful to say that here they are, fresh from death. And he was one of those heroes that, heard on his phone what was going on and grabbed his gun and gathered up his soldiers and went, and he was killed. And at the same time, they chose that moment to be happy and to experience the joy of it. So you do see a lot of this combination. And, the war isn't the first time that this has happened. You always have stories that are a little bit sadder, more complicated. You're right. It's increased exponentially, but it's empowering on the one hand and inspirational. And I think that I mostly walk away from my work and my job and the deliveries and the situation feeling very privileged, that as painful and as sad as it can be on one hand, that it can be as amazing, and you're bringing light into the world at the end of the day. And that's tremendous.
I think that people are going to hear about this and they're going to be very moved. And they will probably ask me, is there any way that I can contribute? This is such an incredible initiative and it's such an important one. Is there something that we can do?
Well, you know what? Because it is through the Jewish Federation of Northern America, JFNA, I don't know this for sure, but it could be that on their website they might have a link to donate to specifically this program. It's called Litzidech, which I don't know what the English translation that
By
they
your
have.
side.
By your
something
side.
like that,
But
yeah.
if you go on to the Israel Midwives Association, they have a whole explanation of all of the programs. So if you go onto their website, you can find an explanation of the programs, and they might have a link also.
It's, as we do these interviews, we just learn layer upon layer upon layer, so many ways that people's lives are affected. And I just appreciate you bringing so much candor and feeling to this conversation.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the podcast. I started listening and it's been fascinating. As you said, it's just so many people. Everyone has a story. Everyone's been affected. And there's a lot of good that's coming out of this. So,
Yes.
And I think that you're bringing a lot of that out. So,
Well, thank you. I'll take the compliment. Thank you so much for joining me. And we will link to everything you're doing when we release the show notes.
Okay, thanks.
It's your world, and we're living in it. And we know that everything happens for a reason. But all the blood that's been spilled, isn't it enough? Tell us your will, 'cause we wanna fly on your wings. We wanna travel to Jerusalem, your holy city, where we'll finally see you. Until that day arrives, we will fight and we'll survive, because this is the last time. And Am Yisrael. When the sun came up, darkness took its place. They took our little ones. At night I see their faces, but our love is strong and mountain tall. Yeah, our love is stronger than their hate of us all. 'Cause we wanna fly on your wings. We wanna travel to Jerusalem, your holy city, where we'll finally see you. Until that day arrives, we will fight and we'll survive, because this is the last time. And Am Yisrael Chai. We wanna fly on your wings. We wanna travel to Jerusalem, your holy city, where we'll finally see you. Until that day arrives, we will fight and we'll survive, because this is the last time. And Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai. It's your world.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe to What Came After wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us online at whatcameafter.com.